The bar's neon glow spilled onto the rain-slicked sidewalk, a kaleidoscope of red and blue that danced in Ethan's blurred vision. He stumbled out of O'Malley's pub, the world tilting as whiskey burned his throat and regret clawed at his chest. He'd just spilled his heart to his boss, Lucas, in a drunken confession that could ruin everything. Ethan Moore, 26, wasn't supposed to fall for Lucas Hayes. Lucas, 29, was the untouchable CEO of Hayes & Co., a rising marketing firm in Seattle where Ethan worked as a junior copywriter. Lucas was all sharp suits and sharper glares, a man who commanded boardrooms with icy precision. Ethan, with his messy hair and thrift store jackets, was just another employee until tonight, when 3 shots of courage made him blurt out, "I'm in love with you." The memory hit Ethan like a punch. He leaned against a street lamp, the cold metal grounding him as he replayed Lucas's reaction. Those blue eyes, usually so cold, had flickered with something fierce, something Ethan couldn't name. Was it anger? Desire? Or just pity? Lucas hadn't said a word, just stared, his jaw tight, before turning and walking away into the rain. Now, alone in the damp night, Ethan cursed himself. He'd worked at Hayes & Co. for 2 years, keeping his feelings buried under late-night deadlines and stolen glances. Lucas was straight, or so Ethan assumed. Nothing in his polished life suggested otherwise. Yet, that look tonight, it wasn't indifference. Ethan's heart raced at the thought, even as fear gnawed at him. Tomorrow, he'd face Lucas at work. Tomorrow, he might be fired. The next morning, Ethan dragged himself into the office, his head pounding from both the hangover and dread. The open-plan office buzzed with the usual clatter of keyboards and coffee cups, but every sound felt amplified, like a drumbeat counting down to his doom. He avoided the glass-walled corner office where Lucas worked, but he could feel those blue eyes watching him from across the room. More? Lucas's voice cut through the noise, sharp as a blade. Ethan froze at his desk, his stomach dropping. Colleagues glanced up, sensing the tension. Lucas stood in his doorway, his tailored suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. "My office. Now." Ethan's legs felt like lead as he crossed the room, every step a march toward judgment. Inside Lucas's office, the door clicked shut, sealing them in a space that smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Lucas leaned against his desk, arms crossed, his gaze pinning Ethan in place. "You were drunk last night," Lucas said, his voice low, controlled. "Care to explain what you meant?" Ethan's mouth went dry. He wanted to lie, to laugh it off as a joke, but the intensity in Lucas's eyes stopped him. I meant what I said," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry if it made you uncomfortable. I just couldn't keep it in anymore." Lucas didn't move, didn't blink. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken questions. Ethan braced for the worst, a reprimand, a termination, or worse, disgust. But Lucas's next words caught him off guard. "You think you're the only one who's been hiding something." Lucas's voice was quieter now, almost vulnerable. He stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands. "I've spent years building walls. Ethan, you just kicked one down." Ethan's breath hitched. Was Lucas saying what he thought he was? The room felt too small, the air too thick. Before he could respond, Lucas turned away, staring out the window at Seattle's gray skyline. "This can't happen," Lucas said, his tone final. "Not here. Not now." The rejection stung, but Ethan caught the crack in Lucas's voice, the way his shoulders tensed as if fighting himself. There was more to this, more to Lucas, than the cold exterior he showed the world. Ethan wanted to push, to ask what Lucas was hiding, but the weight of the moment held him back. "Get back to work," Lucas said, still facing the window. "We'll talk later." Ethan left the office, his mind a storm of hope and confusion. Lucas hadn't fired him. He hadn't recoiled. Instead, he'd hinted at something deeper, something that made Ethan's heart pound with possibility. As he sat at his desk, pretending to focus on emails, he couldn't shake the image of Lucas's eyes, those flames beneath the ice. That evening, Ethan stayed late, tweaking ad copy under the glow of his desk lamp. The office emptied out, leaving only the hum of the air conditioning and his own thoughts. He was about to leave when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the pier. 9 p.m. Ethan's heart stopped. Lucas. It had to be. But why the pier? Why now? He grabbed his jacket, his pulse racing as he headed into the night, unsure if he was walking toward salvation or heartbreak. The Seattle pier was alive with the hum of the city waves lapping against wooden posts, the distant laughter of tourists, and the salty tang of the ocean. Ethan stood at the edge, clutching his jacket against the chilly September wind, his eyes scanning for Lucas. The text had been cryptic, but the fact that Lucas had reached out at all felt like a lifeline. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Ethan's breath caught. Lucas looked different out here, away from the office's sterile lights. His usual suit was replaced by a dark sweater and jeans, his hair slightly tousled by the breeze. Those blue eyes, though, still burned with that unreadable intensity. "You came," Lucas said, stopping a few feet away. His voice was softer than at work, but there was an edge to it, like he was holding something back. "You asked me to," Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone steady. "What's this about?" Lucas glanced out at the water, his jaw tight. For a moment, Ethan thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, Lucas spoke. "Last night, what you said. It's been eating at me all day." He turned to face Ethan, his expression raw. "I've spent my whole life keeping people at arm's length. Especially people like you. People like me." Ethan's heart sank. Did Lucas mean because he was gay? Because he was an employee? Or something else entirely? Lucas stepped closer, his voice dropping. "People who make me feel things I'm not supposed to feel." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan's pulse quickened, but before he could speak, Lucas continued. "I'm your boss, Ethan. I'm supposed to be in control. But you're a goddamn wildfire." Ethan's mind reeled. This wasn't the cold, distant Lucas he knew. This was someone fighting a battle Ethan hadn't seen until now. "Then why am I here?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. "If this can't happen, why did you ask me to come?" Lucas's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "Because I can't stop thinking about you," Lucas admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And it's tearing me apart." The confession hit Ethan like a wave, pulling him under. He wanted to reach out, to close the gap between them, but fear held him back. Lucas was his boss. Yes, but he was also a man with walls so high Ethan wasn't sure he could climb them. Yet, here Lucas was, cracking those walls open, just enough to let Ethan glimpse the man inside. "I don't know what this means," Ethan said, his voice raw. "But I meant what I said last night. I love you, Lucas. And I'm not sorry for it." Lucas's face softened, but pain flickered in his eyes. "You don't know me, Ethan. Not really. There's history. Things I've buried." He ran a hand through his hair, looking out at the dark water. "My family, my past EVE shaped me into someone who doesn't get to have this." "Then tell me," Ethan pressed, stepping closer. "Let me in." I'm not asking for everything. Just something. Lucas hesitated, his gaze searching Ethan's face as if looking for a reason to trust him. Finally, he spoke. My father was a pastor. Strict. Old school. When I was a teenager, I had feelings for someone. A guy. His voice cracked, and he looked away. My father found out. He made sure I'd never forget the consequences. Ethan's heart ached at the pain in Lucas's voice. He wanted to ask more, to understand the scars Lucas carried. But the vulnerability in Lucas's eyes told him to tread carefully. I'm not your father, Ethan said softly. And I'm not going anywhere. Lucas's gaze snapped back to him, a storm of emotions swirling in those blue eyes. For a moment, Ethan thought Lucas might close the distance, might let the walls fall completely. But then Lucas stepped back, his expression hardening. This was a mistake, he said, his voice tight. I shouldn't have asked you here. Lucas. Wait, Ethan reached out. But Lucas was already turning away, disappearing into the crowd along the pier. Ethan stood frozen, the weight of Lucas's words sinking in. A mistake. Yet, Lucas's confession lingered, a spark of hope in the chaos of Ethan's heart. The next day at work, Lucas was back to his cold, professional self, barking orders and avoiding Ethan's gaze. But Ethan noticed the cracks Lucas's hand lingering on a file, his eyes flicking to Ethan when he thought no one was watching. Something had shifted, and Ethan wasn't ready to let it go. That night, Ethan found a note slipped into his jacket pocket, written in Lucas's sharp handwriting, "Meet me at my place. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. We need to talk." An address followed, a high-rise in downtown Seattle. Ethan's heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Lucas was letting him in, even if just a little. But what would he find behind those walls? Ethan stood outside Lucas's apartment building, a sleek glass tower that screamed wealth and isolation. The note in his pocket felt like a grenade, one that could either blow open a new future or destroy everything. He buzzed the intercom, his heart hammering as Lucas's voice, clipped and formal, told him to come up. The elevator ride to the penthouse was agonizingly slow. Ethan's mind raced with questions. Why had Lucas invited him here? Was this another rejection, or something more? When the doors opened, Lucas stood in the hallway, his expression unreadable but his eyes betraying a flicker of nervousness. Come in, Lucas said, stepping aside. His apartment was a study in minimalism, clean lines, white walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's twinkling skyline. It felt like Lucas, beautiful, cold, and untouchable. Ethan stood awkwardly in the living room, his hands shoved in his pockets. You said we needed to talk. Lucas nodded, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey from a decanter. He handed one to Ethan, their fingers brushing for a split second. The contact sent a jolt through Ethan, but Lucas pulled back quickly, as if burned. Sit, Lucas said, gesturing to a leather couch. Ethan sat, clutching the glass like a lifeline. Lucas remained standing, pacing slightly, his movements restless. I owe you an explanation, Lucas began, his voice low. About last night. About me. Ethan stayed silent, sensing Lucas needed to unravel this on his own. Lucas took a sip of whiskey, his eyes distant. My father didn't just disapprove of who I was, he said. He sent me to conversion therapy when I was 16. 2 years of being told I was broken, that my feelings were a sin. His voice trembled, and he set the glass down, his hands shaking. I learned to hide, to be someone else, someone safe. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to reach out, to comfort Lucas, but the weight of his story kept him rooted. I'm so sorry, Ethan whispered. No one should go through that. Lucas's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. I built this life, Hayes & Co. The suits. The distance, because it was easier than facing who I am. But then you came along, Ethan, with your damn honesty and your stupid smile. And he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. You make me want to be brave again. Ethan's heart soared, but fear tempered his hope. What does that mean for us? He asked, his voice barely steady. Lucas stopped pacing, standing close enough that Ethan could smell his cologne. I don't know, Lucas admitted. I've never let myself feel this way. Not since. He didn't finish, but Ethan could fill in the blanks. Not since the boy from his past, the one his father had torn him away from. Then let's figure it out, Ethan said, standing to meet Lucas's gaze. Together. For a moment, Lucas looked like he might bolt. But then, slowly, he reached out, his fingers grazing Ethan's cheek. The touch was tentative, electric. Ethan leaned into it, his breath catching as Lucas's thumb traced his jawline. You're dangerous, Lucas murmured, but there was no anger in his voice, only longing. They stood there, inches apart, the city lights casting shadows across their faces. Ethan wanted to kiss him, to close the distance, but he waited, letting Lucas decide. Lucas's eyes searched his, and then, in a rush of courage, Lucas leaned in, his lips brushing Ethan's in a kiss that was soft, hesitant, and achingly real. The world fell away. Ethan's hands found Lucas's waist, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. Years of pent-up desire breaking free. When they finally pulled apart, Lucas's forehead rested against Ethan's, his breathing uneven. I don't know how to do this, Lucas whispered. We'll learn, Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. But the moment was shattered by a sharp knock at the door. Lucas tensed, stepping back as if caught. Stay here, he said, his voice tight. He crossed the room and opened the door, revealing a woman in her 50s, her expression stern. Lucas, she said, her voice cold. We need to talk about your father. Ethan's stomach dropped. Lucas's face paled, the vulnerability gone, replaced by the mask Ethan knew too well. Mother, Lucas said, his tone flat. This isn't a good time. The woman's eyes flicked to Ethan, narrowing with disapproval. I can see that, she said. But this can't wait. As Lucas stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him, Ethan stood alone in the apartment, the warmth of the kiss fading. Whoever this woman was, her presence felt like a storm cloud, threatening to unravel everything Lucas had just begun to embrace. Ethan paced Lucas's living room, the city lights outside mocking him with their calm beauty. The muffled voices from the hallway seeped through the door, Lucas's low and controlled, his mother's sharp and insistent. Ethan caught fragments. Your father. Responsibility. Disgrace. Each word tightened the knot in his stomach. He wanted to barge out there, to stand by Lucas. But he stayed put, gripping the whiskey glass until his knuckles whitened. When Lucas returned, his face was a mask of stone, but his eyes betrayed a storm. She's gone, he said, his voice clipped. He poured another drink, downing it in one go. My mother has impeccable timing. Who is she to you? Exactly, Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. The weight of Lucas's past was crashing into their present, and Ethan needed to understand. Lucas sighed, sinking onto the couch. Elizabeth Hayes. My mother. She's a force of nature. He rubbed his temples, as if warding off a headache. My father's been sick. Cancer. She wants me to come back to Spokane, to make things right before he dies. Ethan sat beside him, careful not to touch, sensing Lucas's fragility. Make what right? He asked gently. Lucas's laugh was bitter. Me? My father never forgave me for who I am. He thinks I'm an abomination. And now, with him dying, my mother believes I owe him some kind of redemption. He looked at Ethan, his eyes haunted. She doesn't know about you. But she saw you here, and she's not stupid. Ethan's heart sank. What does that mean for you? For us? Lucas didn't answer right away. He stared at the empty glass in his hand, as if it held the solution. I don't know, he said finally. I've spent my life running from them, from their judgment. But seeing you, feeling this, he gestured between them, his voice breaking. It's like I'm waking up, and it scares the hell out of me. Ethan reached out, his hand resting on Lucas's knee. You don't have to face them alone, he said. I'm here. If you'll let me be. Lucas's eyes softened, but the fear lingered. You don't know what you're signing up for, he said. My family not like you. They don't see love the way you do. Then show me, Ethan said, his voice firm. Let me see all of you. Lucas. The good, the bad, the messy. I'm not going anywhere. For a moment, Lucas looked like he might argue, but then he leaned forward, capturing Ethan's lips in a kiss that was fierce, desperate, as if he could pour all his fear and hope into it. Ethan kissed him back, his hands tangling in Lucas's hair, anchoring them both in the moment. The next week was a whirlwind. At work, Lucas maintained his cold facade, but stolen moments in empty conference rooms and late-night texts revealed a man unraveling, letting Ethan in bit by bit. They shared dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants, laughing over greasy burgers and swapping stories of their pasts. Ethan learned Lucas loved jazz, hated cilantro, and had a secret talent for sketching. Lucas learned Ethan dreamed of writing novels, not had copy, and had a soft spot for stray cats. But the shadow of Lucas's family loomed. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, Lucas's phone buzzed relentlessly. He ignored it at first, but when he finally checked, his face darkened. It's my mother, he said. She's coming to Seattle tomorrow. She wants to meet. Ethan's stomach twisted. Do you want me there? He asked, unsure if he was ready to face the woman who'd looked at him like he was a mistake. Lucas hesitated, then nodded. I need you there, he said. But it's not going to be easy. The next day, they met Elizabeth at an upscale cafe downtown. She sat ramrod straight, her designer coat draped over the chair, her eyes cold as she assessed Ethan. So, she said, stirring her tea with precision, you're the reason my son's been distracted. Mother, Lucas warned, his voice low. Ethan swallowed his nerves. I care about Lucas, he said, meeting her gaze. And I think he deserves to be happy. Elizabeth's lips thinned. Happiness is a luxury, young man. Lucas has responsibilities. To his family. To his father's legacy. She turned to Lucas. Your father's dying, and he wants to see you. To know you've corrected your path. Lucas's hand clenched under the table, and Ethan reached for it, squeezing gently. I'm not a mistake to be corrected, Lucas said, his voice steady but laced with pain. Not anymore. Elizabeth's face didn't soften. You're throwing away everything we built for you, she said. For this. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, dismissive. The words cut, but Ethan held Lucas's hand tighter. He's not throwing anything away, Ethan said. He's building something new. Elizabeth stood, her expression icy. We'll see, she said, and left without another word. Lucas let out a shaky breath, his hand still in Ethan's. Thank you, he whispered. I don't know if I could have done that without you. Ethan smiled, his heart full despite the tension. We're in this together. Remember? But as they left the cafe, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Elizabeth's visit was only the beginning of a larger battle, one that would test the fragile bond they were building. The days after Elizabeth's visit were a tightrope walk. Lucas threw himself into work, his cold demeanor sharper than ever. But Ethan saw the cracks late night calls where Lucas's voice trembled. Quiet moments when he'd reach for Ethan's hand like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Ethan wanted to believe they could weather this, but the weight of Lucas's family felt like a storm waiting to break. One evening, as they sat on Lucas's couch, jazz playing softly in the background, Lucas dropped a bombshell. I'm going to Spokane, he said, staring at the whiskey in his glass. This weekend. To see my father. Ethan's heart sank. Do you want me to come? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Lucas shook his head. This is something I need to do alone. But, he looked at Ethan, his eyes vulnerable. I need you to be here when I get back. Promise me. I promise, Ethan said, his voice thick. He pulled Lucas close, their foreheads touching, and for a moment, the world was just them. But fear not at Ethan, what would Lucas face in Spokane? Would his father's judgment pull him back into the cage he'd fought so hard to escape? Lucas left on Friday, and the weekend stretched endlessly for Ethan. He threw himself into work, tweaking ad campaigns and sketching ideas for the novel he dreamed of writing. But his mind kept drifting to Lucas, imagining him in a sterile hospital room, facing a man who tried to break him. Late Saturday night, Lucas texted, "It's worse than I thought. Talk tomorrow." When Lucas returned Sunday evening, he looked like a ghost of himself, pale, eyes hollow, his usual confidence gone. Ethan met him at his apartment, where Lucas collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. He didn't even look at me, Lucas said, his voice raw. He just kept saying I'd failed him, that I'd chosen sin over family. Ethan knelt in front of him, taking his hands. You haven't failed anyone, he said fiercely. You're here, living your truth. That's strength. Lucas's eyes met his, glistening with unshed tears. I don't know if I'm strong enough, he admitted. My mother was there, pushing me to stay, to fix things. I almost didn't come back. But you did, Ethan said, cupping Lucas's face. You came back to me. Lucas leaned into his touch, and they kissed, slow and desperate, as if they could hold the world at bay. But the peace was short-lived. The next morning, Ethan arrived at work to find whispers spreading like wildfire. Someone had seen him and Lucas at the waterfront, their hands intertwined. By noon, an anonymous email had circulated to the entire office, outing Lucas as gay and accusing him of favoritism toward Ethan. The office became a minefield. Colleagues avoided Ethan's eyes, and Lucas's door stayed closed all day. When Ethan finally knocked, Lucas was at his desk, his face a mask of fury and fear. This could ruin everything, Lucas said, his voice tight. The board's already questioning my leadership. If this gets out to clients, we'll handle it, Ethan said, though his own fear churned inside him. We're not doing anything wrong. Lucas's laugh was hollow. You think that matters? Perception is everything in this business. He stood, pacing. I need to fix this. I need to. He stopped, his eyes meeting Ethan's. And for a moment, the mask slipped. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. You won't, Ethan said, stepping closer. But you need to decide what you're fighting for. Your company, or us. Lucas didn't answer, and the silence cut deeper than any words could. That night, Lucas canceled their dinner plans, citing a board meeting. Ethan went home alone, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas was slipping away, pulled back into the closet by fear and expectation. The next day, Lucas called a company-wide meeting. Ethan sat in the back, his heart pounding as Lucas stood at the front, his suit impeccable, his voice steady. "There have been rumors," Lucas said, his eyes scanning the room but avoiding Ethan's. "I want to set the record straight. My personal life is just that personal. But I will not tolerate slander or discrimination in this workplace." The room was silent, but Ethan's heart sank. Lucas hadn't denied the rumors, but he hadn't embraced them either. It was a half step, a compromise that left Ethan aching for more. After the meeting, Lucas pulled him aside. "I'm trying," Lucas said, his voice low. "But I need time." Ethan nodded, but doubt crept in. How much time could they afford when the world was closing in? That evening, as Ethan walked home, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Leave Lucas alone. You're ruining him." The words chilled him, a reminder that their love was a battlefield, and the war was far from over. Ethan stared at the threatening message, his pulse racing. The words felt like a blade, sharp and personal, but the sender was a ghost unknown, faceless. He wanted to tell Lucas, to share the burden, but Lucas was already drowning in his own battles. Ethan shoved his phone in his pocket, the Seattle rain mirroring the storm in his chest as he walked home. At work, the tension was palpable. Lucas was a shadow of himself, his interactions clipped, his office door a barrier. Ethan tried to focus on his work, but the anonymous email and the message gnawed at him. Who knew about them? Was it someone in the office? Or worse, someone from Lucas's past? The uncertainty was suffocating. That evening, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He knocked on Lucas's office door, ignoring the late hour. Lucas looked up from his laptop, his eyes tired but softening at the sight of Ethan. "You shouldn't be here," Lucas said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Neither should you," Ethan replied, closing the door behind him. "You're killing yourself trying to please everyone." He pulled out his phone, showing Lucas the message. "This came last night. Someone's watching us. Lucas." Lucas's face darkened as he read the text. "This is why I can't do this," he said, his voice low. "Every step I take toward you puts us both at risk." "Then fight back," Ethan said, his voice rising. "Stop hiding. You're not the scared kid your father tried to break. You're stronger than that." Lucas stood, his hands clenched. "You don't get it, Ethan. If I come out, I lose everything: me company, my family, my reputation. I've seen what happens when people like me take that risk." "And what happens if you don't?" Ethan shot back. "You live a lie. You push me away and end up alone." He stepped closer, his voice softening. "I love you, Lucas. And I think you love me too. Isn't that worth fighting for?" Lucas's eyes glistened, and for a moment, Ethan thought he'd broken through. But then Lucas turned away, his voice barely audible. "I need to think. Please, Ethan. Just go." Ethan left, his heart heavy. He wanted to believe Lucas would choose them, but doubt was a relentless enemy. The next day, Lucas was absent from the office, leaving only a vague email about personal matters. Ethan's anxiety spiked. Had Lucas gone back to Spokane? Had his mother's influence won? That night, Ethan found himself at O'Malley's pub, the place where it all began. He nursed a beer, staring at the spot where he'd confessed to Lucas. The memory felt like a lifetime ago, yet the pain was fresh. His phone buzzed, and his heart leapt, hoping it was Lucas. Instead, it was another anonymous message: "You're not good enough for him. Walk away." Ethan's blood boiled. He was done being a pawn in someone else's game. He texted Lucas, "I'm at O'Malley's. I need you here. Now." He didn't expect a reply. But minutes later, Lucas walked through the door, his face a mix of exhaustion and determination. "You didn't have to come," Ethan said, his voice softer than he intended. "Yes, I did," Lucas replied, sliding into the booth across from him. "I've been running from you for too long." He reached across the table, his hand covering Ethan's. "I'm scared, Ethan. But I'm done letting fear win." Ethan's heart swelled, but the anonymous messages loomed in his mind. "Someone's trying to tear us apart," he said, showing Lucas the new text. "We need to find out who." Lucas's jaw tightened. "I have a guess," he said. "My mother's been digging into my life. She's done it before, hired people to keep tabs on me." He leaned back, his eyes dark. "But I'm not letting her control me anymore." They left the pub together, walking into the night with a new resolve. Lucas took Ethan's hand, a small but defiant act. "I'm going to come out," Lucas said, his voice steady. "To the board. To the company. I'm done hiding." Ethan squeezed his hand, pride and fear warring inside him. "I'll be right beside you," he said. "No matter what." The next morning, Lucas called another company meeting. Ethan stood in the back, his heart in his throat as Lucas took the podium. "I've let rumors dictate too much," Lucas said, his voice clear. "So here's the truth. I'm gay. And I'm in love with Ethan Moore." The room erupted in whispers, but Lucas held his ground, his eyes finding Ethan's. For the first time, Ethan saw not just fire in those blue eyes, but freedom. They were far from safe, but they were together, and that was enough for now. The fallout from Lucas's announcement was immediate. By noon, the office was a battlefield of whispers and sidelong glances. Some colleagues offered quiet support. Others avoided Ethan and Lucas entirely. The board called an emergency meeting, and Lucas disappeared behind closed doors, leaving Ethan to face the office alone. His desk felt like a spotlight, every move scrutinized. But Ethan held his head high, fueled by Lucas's courage. That evening, Lucas found Ethan at his apartment, a small walk-up cluttered with books and half-finished manuscripts. Lucas looked drained, his tie loosened, but his eyes still held that spark. "The board's divided," he said, sinking onto Ethan's couch. "Some want me out. Others think my personal life is irrelevant. But the clients, they're nervous." Ethan sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Lucas's hand found his, fingers intertwining. "I want to fight," he said. "For the company. For us. But I need to know you're all in, Ethan. This could get ugly." "I'm all in," Ethan said without hesitation. "I've been all in since that drunken night." Lucas smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made Ethan's heart skip. They kissed, slow and grounding, a promise sealed in the quiet of Ethan's apartment. But the moment was interrupted by a sharp knock. Ethan opened the door to find a courier holding an envelope marked with the Hayes & Co. logo. Inside was a letter from the board, demanding Lucas's resignation unless he addressed the concerns about his leadership. Attached was a printed screenshot of the anonymous email that had outed them, along with a new message: "Step down, or we expose more." The threat was clear, and Ethan's blood ran cold. "It's her," Lucas said, his voice low and certain. "My mother. She's done this before: blackmail, manipulation. She thinks she can control me." He crumpled the letter, his hands shaking with rage. "I'm done playing her game." Ethan took the crumpled paper, smoothing it out. Then we fight her together, he said. But we need proof. If she's behind this, we need to catch her. Lucas nodded. His jaw set. They spent the night digging through Lucas's old emails, searching for any trace of his mother's interference. They found nothing concrete, but a pattern emerged: vague threats from unknown accounts, always timed with moments Lucas defied his family. It was enough to convince Ethan they were on the right track. The next day, Lucas confronted the board, refusing to resign. He laid out his vision for Hayes & Co. His voice steady, his passion undeniable. Ethan watched from the sidelines, pride swelling in his chest. But the victory was short-lived. That afternoon, a major client pulled their account, citing instability in leadership. The news hit Lucas hard, and Ethan found him in his office, staring out at the city with a defeated slump. We can't let her win, Ethan said, closing the door behind him. She's trying to break you, but you're stronger than this. Lucas turned, his eyes glistening. What if I'm not? He whispered. What if I lose everything? Then we build something new, Ethan said, stepping closer. Together. Lucas pulled him into a fierce embrace, and for a moment, they held each other against the world. But the threats didn't stop. Another message arrived that night, this time with a photo of Ethan and Lucas kissing at the waterfront. The caption read, "This ends now." Ethan's heart raced, but Lucas's reaction was different. Enough, he said, his voice hard. I'm going to Spokane. I'm confronting her. I'm coming with you, Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Lucas hesitated, then nodded. Okay. But this is my fight. Ethan. I need to face her. They drove to Spokane the next morning, the 6-hour journey tense and quiet. Ethan stole glances at Lucas, whose hands gripped the wheel like a lifeline. When they arrived at the Hayes family home, a sprawling estate that reeked of old money, Ethan felt like an intruder. Elizabeth greeted them at the door, her smile tight and unwelcoming. Lucas, she said, ignoring Ethan. I didn't expect you to bring company. I'm here to end this, Lucas said, his voice cold. No more games. Mother. No more threats. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed, but she stepped aside, letting them in. The house was a museum of repression: artwork, religious icons, and photos of a younger Lucas, his smile forced. As they sat in the parlor, Elizabeth's composure cracked. You're throwing away your father's legacy, she said. For him. No, Lucas said, his voice steady. I'm claiming my life, and I'm done letting you control it. Ethan's heart swelled with pride, but Elizabeth's next words chilled him. You'll regret this, she said. You have no idea what's coming. The air in the Hayes family parlor was thick with tension, Elizabeth's words hanging like a guillotine. Ethan sat beside Lucas, his presence a quiet anchor, but his mind raced. What did she mean by what's coming? Lucas's face was a mask of defiance, but Ethan saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. You don't get to threaten me anymore, Lucas said, his voice low but unwavering. I know you're behind the messages, the emails, the photos. It stops now. Elizabeth's lips curled into a cold smile. You think you can walk away from your family, from your responsibilities, for some fling. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, dismissing him. You're a Hayes, Lucas. You don't get to choose. I already have. Lucas shot back. He stood, pulling Ethan up with him. We're done here. As they turned to leave, Elizabeth's voice cut through the silence. Your father's will is being revised. If you continue this, you'll be cut off. No inheritance. No legacy. Nothing. Lucas froze, his hand tightening around Ethan's. For a moment, Ethan thought he might waver, but Lucas turned, his eyes blazing. "Keep it," he said. "I don't need your money to be who I am." They left the house, the door slamming behind them. In the car, Lucas was silent, his hands shaking as he started the engine. Ethan reached for him, his voice soft. "You okay?" Lucas nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I just burned every bridge I had," he said. "But I feel free." The drive back to Seattle was quiet, but their hands stayed linked, a lifeline in the storm. Back in the city, they faced the fallout. Another client pulled out, and the board scheduled a vote on Lucas's leadership. But Lucas was different now, more resolute. He worked late, restructuring the company's strategy, while Ethan took on extra projects to prove their worth. One night, as they shared takeout in Lucas's apartment, Ethan found a flash drive in his jacket pocket, left there during their Spokane trip. Curious, he plugged it into his laptop. It contained emails, dozens of them, between Elizabeth and a private investigator, detailing Lucas's movements, including the waterfront photo. There was even a draft of the anonymous email that had outed them. "Lucas," Ethan called, his voice urgent. "You need to see this." Lucas's face hardened as he read the emails. "This is it," he said. "Proof." He forwarded the files to his lawyer, a plan forming. The next day, he presented the evidence to the board, exposing Elizabeth's campaign against him. The revelation shifted the tide. Some board members, outraged by the manipulation, rallied behind Lucas. But the victory came at a cost. Lucas's father passed away that week, and Elizabeth cut all contact. Lucas grieved in silence, and Ethan stayed by his side, offering quiet support. One evening, as they walked along the pier where they'd first confronted their feelings, Lucas stopped, his eyes on the water. "I lost my family," he said, his voice soft. "But I found something better." He turned to Ethan, his smile small but real. "You." Ethan's heart swelled. "We found each other," he said, pulling Lucas close. They kissed under the streetlight, the city humming around them, and for the first time, Ethan felt like they could face anything. Months later, Hayes & Co. stabilized, thanks to Lucas's relentless work and Ethan's creative campaigns. The board vote kept Lucas as CEO, and the company began to attract clients who valued authenticity. Ethan started writing his novel, inspired by their journey, while Lucas sketched in his free time, his art a quiet rebellion against his past. One night, at O'Malley's pub, they sat in the same booth where Ethan had confessed his love. Lucas raised his glass, his eyes warm. "To us," he said. "To choosing love over fear." Ethan clinked his glass against Lucas's, his heart full. "To us," he echoed. They'd faced judgment, threats, and loss, but they'd come out stronger, their love a testament to courage and truth. As they left the pub, hand in hand, the neon lights cast a warm glow, a promise of a future they'd build together, one fearless step at a time.